Good morning to you once again. It's Morning at the NTV Wednesday's edition. We have a lot to digest into now, especially in the wake of this week where we've had the Uganda Human Rights Commission coming out to look into some cases of the past, some dating us back as 7 years. That's the backbone of us and our conversation in our Kickstarter this morning: status of human rights in Uganda and the synopsis of human rights concerns for us as Uganda. Now, over the past year, there have been frequent reports of how journalists have been attacked and how new legislation has been used as a tool to silence them. In October 2016, the Non-Governmental Organisations Act came into force, and at that time this piece of legislation had been there to direct effect on Uganda's civil society, especially for those working in the field of the human rights. Now, among other things, making human rights observance a contentious issue in Uganda, and of course looking into recent times, the Human Rights Commission releasing a report of human rights for 2022, where all concerns scooped. That's a question mark. And what is the relevance of these cases after a long time? Well, this morning I'm joined by George Musisi. He's a human rights lawyer, and also Madame Sarah Bireete, a human rights activist, to illuminate for us and help us analyze the 2022 Human Rights Report. Where we stand: was everything captured? Was it fair? Was it equitable? That's a big question, hoping that they'll provide us with the answers. Good morning to you, Mr. Musisi.
Good morning, Priscilla. Good morning, viewers. Pleasure to be here.
All right. Good morning to you, Sarah Bireete.
Good morning, Priscilla and viewers. I'm glad to be here.
All right. Let me start with the man that's been wearing his tie heavily this week. Looking at the Human Rights Commission, it's been listening to cases this week, especially starting from Monday. Dr. Kizza Besigye, they were summoning the Principle for National Unity platform and really looking into cases that had been placed before them, dating to back as 2016. That's a lot of time. That's a whole cycle that has gone, and another election that has even passed through those years. How relevant is this attention to these cases now?
That's a pertinent question, Priscilla, because when you talk about human rights violations, it's even one thing to be violated or to be a victim, but another thing for you to get redress. If you look, the Human Rights Commission Tribunal is mandated to hear these cases, but because of its specific nature, it's even envisaged that it should be faster than the courts, because ordinarily we have a problem with courts taking long. But if you have a tribunal, what was envisaged that it will be quickly disposing of human rights cases, such that if a person is complaining of a violation, they can easily get a remedy. By the mere fact that a person can allege a violation that has happened as far as 2015, 16, 17, the tribunal first of all is sitting for only 3 days, Monday to Wednesday to today, hearing cases of as far back as 5, 6, 7 years ago. And this is just a hearing. It's not even giving a ruling. To the victims of the human rights violations, it's too little, too late. Even if that award comes, because first of all, we have a problem, as if it was even highlighted in the report you cited, that many of the people who are given those awards rarely get them. When an award comes 7 years after the complaint, and then you take almost 7 to get it from the government, from the Attorney General. It's certainly, it's as if an administrative violation of rights as well. Because recently we passed a very good act, and it was envisaged that for human rights cases where people get awards, let them be expedited through the system, because these awards for compensation, you are saying I was beaten, I need treatment. So if the award, the hearing itself comes 7 years later, and even if you are to successfully get the award, you don't even have a time from when to get the award. For me, I think it's another injustice. It's an administrative injustice and an administrative violation. So for me, the tribunal hearings, I look at them in that context, that it's too little, too late for the victims of the human rights violations, and for what the law envisaged, that a tribunal will be working faster to dispose of these cases. It's possibly even slower than courts.
Okay. So in the cases that they're focusing on this week, the political activists,
yes,
Dr. Kizza Besigye and of course Robert Kyagulanyi, what are those particular human rights violations that are being presented before the tribunal?
Dr. Besigye made a complaint in 2017 alleging the state brutality against him during the 2016 elections. We've even got through another cycle of elections during the 2016 elections, and of course it has taken that long for the commission to hear it. Of course, they had his witnesses, and they gave no date to give the judgment. So whether the judgment is delivered as to when, or when we will even get the award successfully, that is a story for another day. Honorable Chagulanyi similarly made a complaint in December 2018. That was after police had blocked his concerts. Remember that he's an artist, and of course the constitution gives everyone a right to practice their profession. So we adduced evidence when we made the complaint then that he had been booked for over 30 shows in 2018, which police blocked. And we thought that it was a violation to his right to practice a profession and to earn a decent living. It has taken us 5 years to hear. Of course, even the hearings were fixed on such a short notice, but then we appeared, we asked for 2 days to read, and they told us, no, we need him as the complainant, and I would asked him for only 2 days, which they told us they will give us any other day of their convenience. So for me, I look at it in the sense of the commission, what our constitution framers envisaged when they are giving this mandate to the Human Rights Commission. The Human Rights Commission should be working on a daily, should be hearing, disposing of human rights cases on a daily, just like other courts. But the mere fact that you take 5 years just to receive a hearing, and I'm sure there are so many other cases which have not yet even been heard, later on decided. So when I see all them in the report posturing that, we've seen an increase in the number of people registering complaints, yes, but how about an increase in disposal would even be better?
Okay. Well, the good is that we're seated next to, an advocate for the constitutional rights of Ugandans. In regards to the constitutional mandate to cases such as what we're looking at, the Uganda Human Rights Commission, the tribunal, and cases being had many, many years later, if it's just the case for big people like that, what's the interpretation and translation for the violation that has been happening on a daily basis to a Wananchi Ugandan?
Well, I think the commission spent about 3 years without being fully constituted, and that was intentional on the political leadership in this country to make the Uganda Human Rights Commission dysfunctional and irrelevant. So if and the tribunal cannot sit unless the commission is fully constituted. So that could have been part of the reason for the delay. But even when you resume as a fully constituted commission, what's your relevancy, what's your contribution, and how effective are you in your mandate? Articles 51 and 2 of the Constitution are very clear on the work of the Uganda Human Rights Commission. Actually, if it was to be effective, it would be the most relevant and most powerful body in this country. That was the purpose of the framers of the Constitution, but it has put itself, boxed itself on the periphery. One, because of the political environment, which does not, seek to protect or defend the human rights of Ugandans, especially those that don't support NRM. They are not treated as human beings. Even when you observe the architecture of our politics, you can hardly see that Uganda is a multi-party, dispensation. The mindset of the leadership is that if you don't support NRM, you are as good as a terrorist. So that's the whole approach to our governance. And the commission maybe sometimes find it fit to act within the political conspiracy of treating opposition as terrorists. The commission released the report just last week, and that was in fulfillment of their mandate as per Article 52, Clause 2 of the Constitution. The report said nothing about civil and political rights. They chose to focus on social, economic, and environmental rights, and it defeats common sense. The categorization of rights, first of all, the standard categorization of human rights is known. Social, political, civil, environmental and economic rights. You can add culture which are normally combined with social cultural rights, are normally categorized together, but you can separate them. So at most you should have 7 thematic areas according to the standard categorization of human rights. But you go break down environment into 2, break down social into 3, and then put 1 economic, and you avoid the political questions of that day. You avoid the highly contested and unprotected rights of Ugandans and freedoms. No mention of media freedoms, no mention of the toxic environment of political parties, no mention of the consistent harassment of members of the political opposition, members of civil society, some members of media that we see being dragged when they are in the course of doing their work, internet rights and freedoms. In a year, moreover, when you are reporting the 2022 is when Parliament enacted the draconian Computer Misuse Amendment Act. And you avoid all that, and you expect Ugandans to clap that you've ticked a box on your constitutional mandate. It was very unfortunate.
Okay. Well, she believes that there was the scraping of the civil and political rights that were not covered in that report. What's your assessment of that report?
I would like to entirely agree with Sarah. One, I would like to give an analogy, Priscilla, of animals in a zoo, which are given all forms of food. They are fed, but they will never stop their desire to break out. For me, I think that whereas there's this debate of which ones are, and that is the mind of the AG one time, I think when he was meeting the ULS executive, he said, but you people are always agitating for civil and political rights. Why don't you talk about economic rights? Economic rights are all important, but in an environment where people cannot speak, for me, I think that because the last 3 years, we have seen a strong decline in not only rule of law and respect for human rights, especially by armed forces. Police has almost criminalized the right to assembly. It has almost criminalized it. Whether you are one person, whether you are 3 people, we've seen it. The way they have brutalized, from political activists to interns, to students holding a press conference, to women, 10 women walking. They have just said, you have no right to demonstrate. And despite a very good constitutional court ruling clarifying to them, even when the constitutional court clarified that police has no powers to give permission over the right to assembly, a police spokesperson had the guts of saying, no, we shall not use POMA, we shall go under the Police Act. So for me, I think that the Human Rights Commission report missed a mark. It's important to highlight the right to fishing, the right to water, the right to, like they clearly said, that food security. But what about the civil and political rights which are too repressed? What about the right to a fair hearing? When we have people being tried in military trials despite a constitutional court ruling. The UHRC chairperson, and I uploaded her strongly for that, wrote a letter early this year to the chairperson of the court martial saying, please respect the court ruling of not trying civilians in the court martial. The chairperson said, I'm waiting for guidance from the Attorney General, as if court judgments are at the mercy of the Attorney General to interpret or not.
Who is a party to the case?
Who has lost
in court.
And court martial has continued to try civilians. So how about the so many people in prisons who have not faced a trial after being committed by the High Court for 5, 4, 6, 7 years? So for me, I think that the report missed a mark at a time when the rule of law is at its lowest, possibly since the promulgation of the Constitution. I think they could have done better in amplifying the position of civil and political rights.
Okay, Sarah, still in accordance with the Human Rights Commission report, looking at the many cases that, again, seemingly are not attended to, but political leaning in terms of how they're being addressed or not even addressed it for that matter. What role is politics actually playing in keeping these human rights observations under the carpet?
No, first of all, let me comment on the verdict of the commission. You know, the purpose of the commission is not just to award damages. The commission has powers of high court, and the constitution is clear. It means that they should recommend, they should award or order dismissal of people who violate human rights. They should not just be there for nominal damages. Nominal damages should be the last. They should use the standard of courts. If somebody has, it's proven that somebody has violated rights, somebody has violated the Constitution, somebody has violated the Human Rights Enforcement Act, what are they doing in office? Why do you just order 8 million to the person who is violated, waiting for the next person to be violated by the same abuser, and you order 1-2 million, which even never comes?
Sure.
It is not a court for nominal awards. Can it do its work? So away from that, when you look at, of course, the political architecture in this country is obvious. You have security as #1 abuse of human rights ever since that commission was established. And who is the commander of the security forces? It's the fountain of honor. At times you don't know whether to use that title. So you are the president, fountain of honor, commander-in-chief. It means that you are the leader, morally, political, and otherwise. So what moral leadership has he demonstrated in this country as a commander of security forces? The forces that violate human rights on a daily basis. And he keeps promoting and rewarding the abusers. So that's the political mindset in this country. And when you have, and for him it keeps him in power. Because if you don't suppress the opposition, then his power is threatened. So the people have ridden on this need, the urgent need for regime retention, to now take it upon some on themselves. People are shooting themselves. People are shooting citizens. Now the country is out of order, out of state brutality, because violence naturally begets violence, and things are out of hand.
Okay. Mr. Musisi, is there a solution to altering the political architecture, as she has called it, with what is presently happening, or will it have to first take change of regime for us to see the then underlying changes we desire?
I strongly think that most of the things stop at the highest point of leadership, and it takes a political will to alter this architecture, even the environment of respect for rights. And I can give an example. Many times the president has come out, even written in the newspapers, one time even held a televised address condemning torture by security forces. The question is, the president has all the powers to act because he's the commander-in-chief. He cannot start condemning like me. So he held a televised address condemning torture, saying security agencies should stop torturing people. But on a weekly, we have people coming out of the ungazetted detention facilities, pointing to a particular area where they're held. We've never even had an investigation, not by the president, not by the UHRC, which has a mandate to say, let's go there unannounced and see what this place where the people are always complaining about. So for me, I think that even these people who brutalize either activists or students, the police, it's because they have read the environment that you have to be brutal in order maybe to be promoted or to be noticed. Because the question is...
To protect even what you have.
To protect what you have. Because the question is, why does a low-ranking and suffering policeman find it in their minds to pepper spray a journalist who is just working, who is not demonstrating, who is not shouting? I'm told, I read in the Monitor recently that Naguru Barracks has not had water for over 5 months. So the same problems that affect Uganda affect these policemen. But why do they come out to brutalize? The only answer, logical answer would be that possibly they have understood that we have to be this brutal to be maybe protected.
Which begs the question that, is it that they, on a personal level, have understood the way the regime is functioning, or perhaps there is unspoken maybe training or mindset altercation that is causing them to respond in the way they're responding to human rights?
They know what attracts the attention of their boss. They've just, of course, everybody has mastered the mind of the leadership in this country. 37 years is a long time. You don't need to do any research. You saw...
Someone was telling me yesterday, after 25 years of marriage, when my wife calls, I know what she's going to tell me before I pick up the call.
But that's even long. You just need 10 years. 10 years of interacting with a person on a daily basis is enough to just to read their mind today, tomorrow, and the other day. But and so when you have a president whose main interest is to keep in power, You have that as a number one interest, the number one objective, if not the sole objective. Then everybody knows how to behave. You can see the impunity going on in the country. You charge ministers in court, and the ministers are officiating as guests of honor after taking Puri in court. And the president cannot act.
Attending cabinet.
You know, previously, people are saying there is no law, you see, that's for public servants. But we've had precedents during the Gavi and Chogam trials that involved ministers. The ministers were told to step aside before arrest. So what is the exception in this time? It's just excessive impunity and failure of the leadership to act.
Okay, all right, we're going to be taking a short pause of this conversation, take a breather, and we return shortly to still look into the other human rights violations and what have been the small, maybe unrecognizable strides that have been taken for the better, if they do exist in the first place. Do stay with us.
TV.
All right, thank you so much for being with us. Very intrigued by your comments across the social media platforms. #morning@NTV. Status of human rights here in Uganda. And of course, I'm joined by Sarah Bireete, human rights activist, and Mr. George Musisi, human rights lawyer equally. And we've been seeing human rights violations taking different trends in most recent times. Post-2021 elections have been the arbitrary arrests, beating up of opposition leaders, and journalists also taking the fat of the regime and its response to anyone that is speaking out their own truth. Picking from a comment that came through from the chairperson of the tribunal, Mariam Nagadia, she said, there's never been kidnaps in the first place. So, Mr. Musisi, the things that you've been talking about and things that have been happening to the National Unity Platform supporters, what do you interpret that statement to be?
I think sometimes, with the greatest of respect to the lady chairperson, she misinterprets her role to think that maybe she's supposed to be part of the ruling party apparatus. I know that there's a list which was submitted to her formally. That list had 22 people who have been missing since the elections. And when someone says that that person is missing and was arrested under these circumstances, and we have gone to court, got all sorts of orders, but the person hasn't been revealed, the duty is on to the state to explain where is this person taken. The chairperson has never given an explanation regarding that list. In fact, one of the persons on that list is called John Bosco Chibalama. He's been missing since 2019. And the Prime Minister was caught on live camera saying that one was arrested over the police attacks. Which police attacks happened last year? Where is he detained? But where is he detained? Where was he charged? So those are questions. There's a group of, there are 2 people on that list. They were arrested in Mukono North, the constituency of Honorable Abdullah Chwanuka. They arrested as a group of 11. We went to court, got orders of habeas corpus before Justice Sakana. The orders were never respected. Then 9 of the 11 were dropped in different parts of the country, some in Yanton, the others in Mengo, others. The 2 have been missing since then. But they were taken by this as a group. 2 are missing till now. So the last 3 years, since 2021, we have been to court over 50 times on habeas corpus applications. In fact, one time the chairperson took issue with the word abduction. That why do you say it's an abduction? It's an arrest. An arrest is defined under the Constitution, that a person will identify themselves, tell you why they are being arrested, tell you the charge, take you to a gazetted place, and present you in court in 48 hours. Anything other than that is not an arrest, envisaged under the law. So if people come, civilian clothes, unmarked car, take you to a place which is not known, hold you for over a month, that can't be defined as an arrest. So for me, that's why I think that the chairperson sometimes misunderstands her roles. And when we go to court, these people are held 4 weeks, 6 weeks. All of them are held at Mbuya. We go to court, get an order of habeas corpus, then they are released without charge. They are dropped. Sometimes they are released at police, say, charged with subversive activity, whatever that offense is, or released without charge. So for me, I think that by the Human Rights Commission report, not documenting such things that have been happening over the last 3 years, almost on a daily, almost on a weekly. Someone is arrested, detained in an unknown place, then later on released without charge. Most times after going to court, and we usually go after like 4 weeks of unlawful detention.
Okay.
That explains the human rights situation, not what is in the reports.
All right. Turning to you, Sarah, there's a civil and political rights shadow report that was released. What were the priority focal areas and the recommendations thereof to avert human rights violations in Uganda?
You know, the key components of the civil and political rights shadow report is a absence of freedom of association, assembly, and expression. It affects citizens' participation in their governance. It affects the civic space, both physical, cyber, and otherwise, including, you know, internet laws and regulations that are draconian. Some of the elements of the old the Computer Misuse Act were declared unconstitutional recently, but we have the new amendments that are more draconian than even what used to exist in the Computer Misuse Act of 2015. We have the state of media. Media, you're the eye of society. At times we see you being clobbered, being, you know, violated in the course of your work. Respect for the media in this country. And that does not cover what happens behind the scenes. We know a lot goes on behind the scenes. Controlling, trying to control editorial, trying to control guests you can bring on such shows, and all that maneuver by the state. So that's what the shadow report points at, and also the failure by Parliament to do their work in protection of the Constitution. Because we have 17 laws that violate Article 29, just one article violated by 17 laws in this country, and these laws are passed by Parliament. So it's as if also the MPs do not understand their work and they do not understand the Constitution.
Okay, all right. Talking of press and its freedoms, there's also been the Press Freedom Index, the translation of that, looking at the past 2 elections, especially 2016, curtailing of social media, Facebook to this day,
Yes.
still officially restricted in our country, and of course the Computer Misuse Act coming into enactment. And so there's been all these ways of just putting pauses and stops and arrests on freedoms of expression, especially by press. What do you say of that, and what are the solutions, especially for those that are trying to honestly be the observers of what's happening in society?
Of course, Priscilla, in a burning house, there cannot be a safe room. And for me, I prefer to look at it in the bigger context of muzzling of both the civic and the free expression of ideas, the free movement of ideas. That's the bigger issue. Beyond the suppression of political rights for political activists, the other issue is the suppression of the free expression of ideas. If you can broadly look at it in the context, Sarah works in the civil society. We know what has been happening. DGF was forced out. I can say that was largely forced out, and how it affected the civil society. You know the battles we've been fighting with the NGO office of Mr. Stephen and all those other issues. So the machinations have been in order to muzzle the civic space. So the media cannot be safer. And of course, even all these other issues of bringing a draconian law of Honorable Nsereko, it is a continuation. And certainly, it can only get worse. The solution, like I said, it goes to the political environment. There is no political will. And right now, all agencies of government, especially the armed forces, and even, of course, these some of these enforcement and regulatory agencies like the NGO office, they look at themselves as protection of the government in power as the priority. So anything which is seen as it meant to attack, it's seen as an opponent. So that's the environment in which police paper sprays journalists. That's the environment in which police club as journalists, because they are seen as agents of the other people opposing us. And that's the biggest problem we're having. So without that political will sorted, I think we are likely to see a more depression of the UN Human Rights Offices closing shop. That's all part of to ensure that because when it was closing shop, the Minister of Foreign Affairs said, no, we have a very strong Human Rights Commission. We all know how strong the Human Rights Commission is.
Okay, all right. While that cannot be a solution given to Ugandans as far as yesterday is concerned, because if a case is taken 7 years just to get a hearing, how much more what you're recommending, Mr. Musisi?
The Foreign Affairs Minister said the Commission has built sufficient capacity.
There's human rights violation, but it starts with human rights. So back to the individuals that are actively, participating in enjoying their rights. A few of them know them, but some actually are going in for the heart of it, but blind of their actual human rights, in blindness of the rule of law, in blindness of the protections that are there for them, and in blindness of civic education. How do we bridge the gap?
Civic education in this country is supposed to be conducted by the same commission that we are discussing. The Human Rights Commission must take leadership, according to the Constitution, on civic education, together with the partners and actors like civil society. And when the Electoral Commission comes in on vote education, which is a subset of civic education. So the challenge with the civic education generally is that there is, again, it goes back to the politics. There is no political commitment to civic education, and there is hardly any funding for government agencies to conduct civic education. Even during elections, Electoral Commission struggles to conduct voter education because of absence of funds. So the political establishment does not invest in civic education, or would not, given the conduct of our governance, they would not benefit from a civically aware and a civically active citizenry. So it would be, foolhardy to expect them to invest in civic education. Then that leaves the bulk of civic education work in the hands of civil society. But the civil society is being brutally battered. Other than the burdensome regulation that we go through, where we saw closure of 54 organizations recently, we have closure of funding. 70% of civic work was being supported by DGF. DGF has closed shop. So you have absence of 70% civil society work in this country. So what can the 30% work achieve? But I want to go back to the definition of human rights, which is basically Ubuntu. Even without education, your instinct will tell you that this is wrong. When you are being violated, your inner voice will tell you this is wrong. So then the question should be, how should citizens act? When they are wronged, where should they go? The decline in our governance has not spared the governance institutions that are supposed to uphold and protect the rights of Ugandans. And that includes the commission that we are discussing. It goes back to the declining, rule of law situation in the country. It goes to the eroding democracy, starting with parliament, which is a temple of democracy in this country. Its conduct, its demeanor, its effectiveness is really on the lowest since the enactment of the 1995 Constitution. Then you go back to the other governance institutions, the Electoral Commission. Sometimes I feel sorry for people who contest in elections. The first by-elections, and we have one coming up, where people are soon to be nominated. But the last by-election in Soroti, you see people came up with a fully ticked ballot box, and they thought, after seeing the chairman electoral commission, they thought they would get remedy. And the chairman electoral commission said to go to police. And you don't even know who is in charge of elections in this country anymore. So that is the general decline of our democracy that cannot spare rights and freedoms, but the call still remains to the people. Once your instinct tells you something is wrong, it means it is wrong, and we must collectively act to redeem our country.
Okay, well, human rights advocate here. The citizens, at the end of the day, how do they get to protect themselves moving forward? They can't control the state and its influence over the civic space or, you know, the political will of individuals. But how do they get to then safeguard themselves, but at the same time exercise their human rights?
Personally, I'm a firm believer in constitutionalism and the rule of law. And despite the challenges that the institutions which are meant to safeguard these rights are facing, for me, I strongly still think that people need to keep on testing. I was reading this former Chief Justice's book recently. Even during Amin's time, people were here practicing law.
Yeah.
So for me, I think that, and many times I have problems, some problems with, for instance, the Human Rights Commission that we've been talking about, but I will not hesitate to refer a client there to go and register the complaint. In the courts, I'm a strong believer, because many times people ask us, but you keep on going to courts. These cases are never heard. Then when they are decided, judgments take long. When you get the award, still they are never respected. But still, I am for testing these institutions. Let citizens keep on lodging these complaints. Let them keep going to the courts for whatever advantages can come out of it. Even if you get 5% of what you expect, for me, I think, one, it's good. But then second, it's also good for documenting. It's good for documenting some of these things. So for me, I urge citizens to keep on testing these institutions, constitutional institutions, especially the judiciary, for purposes of remedy and also documenting some of these evils.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. George Musisi, and thank you so much, Sarah Bireete, for your insights on the status of human rights here in Uganda, and of course the concerns that they have presented. There are some solutions, but when those solutions will become a reality for us, each one of us to benefit from, is a story for another day, and we'll pick it up later on. But allow us to change course and go to Ngamba Island, that is launching a series of activities to mark 25 years of rescuing and keeping chimpanzees in that sanctuary. These chimpanzees have been rescued from the hands of poachers, traffickers, and other human-wildlife conflicts. These species are one of the Uganda's biggest attractions that we do have right now, and so Ivan Walinyolo is perhaps hugging one this morning.